You've seen LIBOR before, but let's talk about it again because this is going to be the basis for most interest rate based forward contracts. LIBOR is the London Interbank Offer Rate. This is the representative rate for high quality non-government borrowers. So when large high quality banks borrow from each other in the dollar market outside the US, most of this is happening in London. The rates that banks charge each other is called LIBOR, and since this is in the private market, it's not as impacted by government actions, and hence this rate is extremely popular now in most interest-based derivative contracts. Another subtle point, when we talked about T-bills in the earlier slide, and when you saw T-bills in obviously fixed income securities as well as in quant, notice that T-bills are quoted based on a discount rate, or sometimes you heard the bank discount yield. Why is this called a bank discount yield? Because if we say the bank discount yield is 2% for a T-bill, then that 2% is a discount based on par value. So a bond that's trading at a 2% discount, if we just take this as an annual bond, 2% discount means that the bond is currently at 98, which is a 2% discount from 100. But when we talk, so that's why this is called a discount basis yield. But LIBOR is a add-on rate. This is much simpler. This is what you would typically expect interest rate to be. And to see this in a very simple example and to see how we work with LIBOR, let's say 30-day LIBOR is 5%. And another quick revision here, this 30-day LIBOR of 5%, this 30-day LIBOR is also the 30-day spot rate, because there are no cash flows that are taking place in this 30-day period. So let's say that 30-day LIBOR is 5%. What is the interest paid on a 30-day $10 million loan? So essentially, let's say you are borrowing $10 million for 30 days and you are paying the 30-day LIBOR rate. The way this works is, the notional principal is 10 million into 5%, so that's 5 over 100 multiplied by, with LIBOR we typically use a 360-day convention, so we then say 30 divided by 360. So if you do the maths, this is equal to the interest that you will pay. Now notice that the interest that you've calculated, which is 5%, which is because 5% is the annualized interest rate, but then 30 over 360 because the period is only 30 days out of 360 days. So you do this calculation, and the amount that you calculate, the interest amount is added on, or is an add-on relative to the amount that you are borrowing. So you calculate this, and that is the interest paid. So now let's talk about forward rate agreements. So these are essentially contracts that involve interest rates. And forward rates we have already studied in fixed income securities. As a quick refresher, when we talked about forward rates, these are the rates, the interest rates in the future. A long position, when we talk about forward rate agreements, is an obligation to take a hypothetical loan at a certain contract rate. Now if you are an industrialist and you know that after 90 days you will need to borrow, let's say, $10 million. So rather than take the risk of interest rates going up in the next 90 days, what you can say right now is, let's say that you will need to borrow this money for 60 days. So here is time 0, here is time let's say 90 when you need to start your loan, and you want to take a loan out for 60 days. So this then becomes 150. So At time 0, if you sign a contract with the dealer, again let's say the dealer is a large financial institution, so at time 0 you sign a contract which says that the interest rate is going to be equal to 5%. So you sign a contract with the dealer that you are going to borrow $10 million at 5% on this day, and obviously in that you also need to specify that this is a 60-day loan. So this is an example of a forward contract where at time 0 you are getting into a contract to borrow a certain sum of money, which is 10 million, for a certain period of time, which is 60 days, at a certain rate, which is 5%. So that's your long position. Now, what happens if interest rates go up? If interest rates go up to say the actual interest rate here is 6%. Now you as the long party benefit. Why? Because the underlying has gone up. The underlying here is interest rate. You had a contract to borrow at 5%. The actual rate is 6%. So even though the actual rate at this day is 60%, you can still borrow your 10 million at 5%, and that's good for you, because if you hadn't gotten into this contract, then you would have to pay 6% to borrow. So as you have, so a consistent theme with forward contracts is the underlying has gone up, so the long party has benefited. Now let's also look at the short position. In the same example, the short position is say the bank. So the short position is this is the bank. So the bank is committing to make the loan, and it's a hypothetical loan. I will explain what this means in a little bit. So the bank is now committing to make the loan at 5%, but if the actual interest rate is 6%, that means the bank has to lend you money at 5% even though the going rate is 6%. So that clearly is not good for the bank, and the bank loses. So that's our long position, that's our short position. A quick word on FRA terminology. The way you might see FRAs described is as follows. So in this example that I have just shown over here, you typically write an FRA as something by something. How do you come up with these somethings? The first number that is specified over here is when will the loan start. So given time 0, the loan is starting at day 90. So this could be written as 90. A 90 by the second number is when does the loan end, starting from today. So given today, in this example above, the loan ends on day 150. So this can be written as a 90 by 150 FRA, which means that at time 0 we are getting into a contract to borrow on day 90, and the money will be returned on day 150. A lot of people make a mistake where they put 60 over here, which would be the duration of the loan, and while that seems logical, but the convention is that both the numbers 90 and 150 are based on the number of days from day 0. Sometimes this is expressed in terms of days. This could also be expressed in terms of months. So the same thing could also be written as 3, so which means the loan will begin 3 months from today, 3 by, and the loan is ending 5 months from day 0. So this could also be written as a 3 by 5 FRA. So make sure you pause here for a minute and understand this terminology, because you need to know this. Now through an example, let's figure out how we determine who pays whom how much. So we are talking about a FRA where the term is 30 days. When we say the term is 30 days, what we mean is the following. We mean that if today is day 0, then the FRA begins on day 30, and FRA must also specify a notional amount. So let's say that the notional amount is 1 million, and since I'm talking about LIBOR, actually I should be talking in terms of dollars. So the notional amount is $1 million. The underlying rate is 90-day LIBOR. Since this is a 90-day LIBOR, that means that the borrowing period is 90 days. So this should be 90 days, which means that in terms of the timeline from day 0, the loan ends on day 120. Okay, if this were in terms of months, then we could have written this as 0 and then 1 month and then month 4. So in terms of months, how would this FRA be written? It would be written as a 1/4. So the loan is beginning 1 month or 30 days from today, and the loan has to be repaid on day 120, which is 4 months from today. And again, the important point is that the FRA contract ends over here. So because on this day we know the interest rate, and the way FRAs work is we actually do a cash settlement on this date. So with FRAs, the loan doesn't actually happen. We just figure out who pays, who owes whom how much, we make that payment and end the chapter. And that's why the underlying loan is referred to as a hypothetical loan. So in my example, the underlying rate is 90-day LIBOR, or the underlying loan is 90-day LIBOR. That means that the loan is for 90 days. The forward rate is 5%. So we are agreeing on a forward rate of 5%. That means that on day 0, we are agreeing that the long will borrow money. Remember, borrowing money is essentially like buying money. The price of money is the interest rate. So the long is willing to, or is not willing to, but is obligated, contractually obligated to pay a rate of 5% on this notional principal. And similarly, the counterparty is obligated to lend, which is like selling money, at a rate of 5%, no matter what the interest rate is. So now that's the agreed amount, that's the forward rate. Let's say now on day 30, the actual LIBOR is 6%. So the actual is 6%. So on this day, the actual is 6%. Now who owes whom how much? Without doing any calculation, you should immediately see that this is good for the long party. Why? Because the long party had a contract that said that he could borrow at 5%. Interest rate is actually now 6%. If he hadn't gotten into this contract, then he would have to borrow at 6%, but now he is borrowing at 1% less, which is 5%. Now how do we figure out? So clearly this means that the short needs to pay some money to the long. The question now is how much money. So let's calculate that, and all this ties in now with basic time value of money calculations. So on day 30, let's look at how much money would, what is the interest that the long would have to pay if he had not gotten into this contract. So if he hadn't gotten into this contract, then the amount of money that the long would have to pay can be calculated as follows. So it would be 6%, which is 6 over 100, multiplied by the notional principal, actually 6 over 100, but then this is for a 90-day period. So let's just simplify this. This is 6% for a year. For a 90-day period, this becomes into 90 over 360 multiplied by the notional principal of 1 million. So this is how much the long would have to pay if the interest rate, if he hadn't gotten into the forward contract. Now, given that he has the forward contract, how much does he actually need to pay given that he has this forward contract? So that amount is 5 over 100, which is, so 5% interest rate, again for a 90-day period, which is 90 over 360 into 1 million. So this is how much he actually pays. So what is the benefit to the long? The net benefit to the long is this number minus this number. So we need to calculate that amount. So let's say that amount is 2,500. So since interest payments are made typically at the end of the period, essentially given that the actual rate here is 6%, we are saying that at the end of the 90-day period, the short has to give the long 2,500. But we want to settle this forward contract on day 30. So I'll just draw this again over here. So now we are on day 30, and so after 90 days, the short has to give the long 2,500. So remember, we are now on this day 30, and after 90 days the short has to give the long 2,500. But the short and the long don't want to wait for 90 days. They know that the current interest rate is 6%. So why not simply discount this 2,500 back to day 30, which is now the present, and figure out how much money the short has to pay the long, and then close out the deal. So the way you can do this is simply find the present value of 2,500 over here, which would simply be 2,500 divided by, so the present value is simply 2,500 over 1 plus, and this number simply represents the interest rate for the 90-day period. This is the convention used in FRAs. A more precise way of doing this could have been 2,500 divided by 1.06 to the power of 90 over 360, which is 0.25. Both these will give you practically the same answer, but in most books you will see things done this way. All we really have done is taken the 2,500 and figured out the present value. Notice that the present value is calculated based on the actual interest rate and not the contract rate. So now that you understand the concept of a forward rate agreement, I just want to share a formula that confuses most students, but since you've understood the material, I want to highlight that the formula is not as bad as it looks. The formula is for figuring out how much the amount is, and I'm just going to do it in the context of the example that we just did. So in our example, we said time 0, the FRA was expired on day 30, and this was for a 90-day LIBOR. So we went up to day 120, and this was for a notional principal of 1 million. So to figure out what is the settlement amount, so I'll just call that the settlement amount over here. The formula that you will see is as follows: notional principal into the floating rate minus the forward rate. So the floating rate minus the forward rate into days over 360, the whole thing divided by 1 plus the floating rate into days over 360. And I just want to highlight that this is exactly what we just did. So notice, how did we calculate our numbers? We said our notional principal was 1 million. The floating rate is if this FRA was actually based on LIBOR, the floating rate means the actual floating rate on day 30. So in our example, that was 6%. Minus the forward rate. The forward rate in our example was 5%. That was the amount in the contract that we had agreed upon at day 0. And then days over 360. So essentially 1 million into 6% minus 5%. So this essentially is the 1% number. So this is the net benefit to the long in my example. The net benefit to the long, but then these are annualized numbers, so we need to bring this down to a 90-day period. So So that's why we multiplied this by 90 over 360. So this number in the numerator gives us the amount on day 120 that the short has to pay the long. Now we want to actually settle over here at day 30. So the amount that we just calculated for the numerator was 2500. We then need to take the 2500 and discount it back to day 30, and to discount back to day 30 we divide by 1 plus the floating rate, which was 0.06 or 6%, into days over 360, which is 90 over 360. So when we divide by this number, essentially we are taking the interest amount that the short has to pay the long on day 120, we are discounting that back to this point. So the complicated looking formula is effectively what we just did on the previous slide. Now let's talk about currency forward contracts. So currency forward contracts are commitments to buy or sell a certain amount of foreign currency for a fixed amount of another currency in the future. And these contracts are extremely popular. So let's make sure we understand how they work. Now imagine that you are a large business in Pakistan and you know that you will need, so you are sitting here on day 0, and on day 90 you will need $10 million. So here on day 0 you know you will need this amount, and let's say you are in the business of importing medical equipment. So you know that you will need to make a payment in terms of dollars, and what you don't want to worry about is the exchange rate on this day. So you can go to a dealer and get into a contract to basically buy dollars for rupees say 90 per dollar. So on day 0 you are agreeing with the counterparty that you will buy $1 for 90 rupees, and the notional principal is 10 million. So essentially you are saying you are going to buy $10 million at rupees 90 per dollar. So you have hedged your risk by essentially fixing the rates that you will pay. So on day 90, if the dollar is more expensive, so on day 90 if the dollar is worth rupees 91, you have hedged your risk because you will still pay 90 rupees per dollar even though the going exchange rate on this date is more. So in this case you have taken the long position, and notice that as always the long position benefits when the underlying goes up. What's the underlying here? The underlying is a dollar. So you have taken a long position in a dollar. Why? Because you have agreed to buy dollars, so you are long the dollar. When we talk about currencies, the confusing thing is that if you are long one currency, that means you are also short the other currency, because buying dollars means that you are selling rupees. But let's just keep things simple. Here we are saying that since you will need $10 million, you are buying dollars, so you are long the dollar. If the dollar strengthens as it does over here, because 90 days later we see that the actual price of the dollar is 91, you as the long party benefited. And obviously if you benefited as a long, then all forward contracts are zero-sum game. That means that if you as the long party benefited, then the counterparty was short the dollar, they obviously lost out because they have to give you $1 for 90 rupees, even though in the market they could get $1 for 91 rupees. So that's your currency forward contract. To highlight the point with this currency forward contracts, I am actually going to do an example from the curriculum. So I'm going to do, question 3, which I believe is a real good illustration of currency forward contracts. Now the way this question goes, we are talking about the end user, which is Sun Microsystems. So Sun Microsystems on day 0, they know that 90 days later they are going to get euro 20 million. So Sun, let's say the European operation has committed to send $20 million to Sun in the US. Now obviously Sun, being an American company, is more concerned about dollars. So all the reporting is now done in dollars. So what Sun then does is it goes to its financial institution. It goes to the dealer, and the currency dealer says that they are willing to sell euros at dollars 0.875. So this is the quote. This is the quote on the forward contract. So this is the forward contract on the currency, where the dealer is saying that, okay, for every dollar that you give me, for every euro that you give me, the dealer will give Sun this many dollars. So let's just make sure we understand. The underlying here now is the euro, and what Sun is doing, Sun is selling euro, and the dealer will buy the euro. So the underlying is the euro with Sun selling. So Sun is taking a short position and the dealer is buying euros, so dealer is taking a long position. Now roll forward 90 days, and 90 days later the actual exchange rate is $0.900 per euro. So not explicitly stated here, but these are numbers on a per euro basis. So what has happened here? The euro has actually appreciated or strengthened. Why do we say that? Because in the forward contract we are saying that each euro is worth $0.875, but what actually happens 90 days later is that each euro is worth $0.9. So the euro has strengthened, or it's become more expensive, or we can say that it has appreciated. So when the underlying strengthens, who benefits? As you should be very familiar by now, the long benefits. So who's the long? The long in this case is the dealer. So the dealer benefits. This means that if this is a cash settlement, which actually the question, the problem in the curriculum says that this is cash settlement, then obviously the Sun needs to pay the dealer a certain amount of money. So the question then is how much money? So let's do this calculation in terms of dollars. So based on the currency forward contract, where we said that Sun is going to sell $20 million at Sun is going to sell 20 million euros at $0.875 per euro. So according to this contract, we can easily calculate that the amount of dollars that Sun is going to get is 17.5 million. So based on this forward contract, Sun has locked in the fact that it's going to get $17.5 million. But had Sun not made this contract, then what would the 20 million euros have been worth? Then based on the actual exchange rate, the 20 million euros would have been worth $18.0 million. So that's what it would have been actually worth. And effectively now, since this is a cash settlement and the long party, which is the dealer, has benefited, that means that Sun needs to make a payment of 0.5 million. So this amount of money will have to go from Sun Microsystems to the dealer. So make sure you spend a little bit of time on this because this is extremely important. The numbers are very straightforward, but just getting your arms around the short and the long and currency appreciation takes a little bit of time. So make sure you spend the time and understand this well. So that is it. Unfortunately, the curriculum does not have too many questions. So try to get practice questions from your study notes. The curriculum only has 3 questions, so make sure you understand those 3 questions very well. Of those 3 questions, I've already done one, which is the one on currencies. So make sure you do the other 2 and do the questions in your study notes, and that should put you in good shape. As always, please post your comments on YouTube, and if you like this video, then click on the like button. If you found this clip interesting and informative, please visit my website www.arifirfanullah.com. Here you will find a tremendous amount of useful material. Right here in the 2011 CFA video lecture series, you will find the entire level 1 curriculum for free, and most of the material here is still relevant, so this is worth looking at. The 2012 video lecture series covers both level 1 and level 2. These lectures are available for a fee. And finally, down here, financial management at IBA. Here you will find my lectures at IBA for a course on financial management. Plus you'll find lots of useful spreadsheets that can help you with financial modeling. So again, please visit www.arifirfanullah.com. Thank you.